This is Art Talk with April, Season 5. This season, we're talking with some return artists from previous seasons and some new artists, some people that are just starting out, and some gallery professionals. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Art Talk with April. Today, we have Sara Bowen, who's a potter. And are you located in Huntsville?
I am, yeah.
Sarah? Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for talking to me today.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
I think we're going to have a really fun conversation. I'm not as well versed in pottery, and it's always interested me, but I never got the chance. Well, I got the chance. I guess I could have signed up for it in college, but I didn't.
Yeah, it happens.
But since then, I still haven't done anything with it. But it'd been really interesting to kind of learn what you're doing and everything.
Yeah.
So how did you get started, like being creative and then getting started into pottery and all of that?
Yeah. I always kind of joke that I started making mud pies as a kid and just never stopped.
Oh, that's awesome.
But as a kid, I was always like doing stuff with my hands. I joke now that like I just can't be still. I have to be doing something with my hands, like watching TV or whatever.
Yeah.
And my mom and my grandma were kind of similar, always like doing something. And my mom was always like making all of our like Christmas decorations and, our wreaths and stuff like that. And my grandmother painted. My granddad owned a sawmill, and so he would take the like offcuts and then cut them into shapes like the ducks. I don't know if you've seen like those like country kind of style wooden ducks.
Yeah.
And I don't think she ever like sold anything or anything like that, but it was always just something like that we always did, and everybody got gifts, and so just always kind of a craft background in my family.
That's fun.
Yeah, and then when I was 15, actually, this is kind of a weird story, but I went to China for a like student ambassador trip during the summer, one summer. We had to like raise money and like learn about where we were going. And we got to go for 17 days. It was amazing. And we got to go to this craft school there, and they had like a fashion part, a culinary part. They had cloisonne, and then they had I think they had a bunch of other stuff, but the main part I remember is the pottery. And so they let us like throw on the wheels, just kind of play around, and of course we didn't get to take anything home, but I was that's kind of when I got hooked.
Yeah.
And so when I got back to high school, I took, we had a really great art program at the Alabama School of Math and Science where I went, which is like kind of funny. Like I got into art at the Math and Science School.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, we had a really great like art department. And so I just basically like practiced whenever I could until college. And in college, I studied art history. And the school I went to did not have a like ceramics program. But at the time, I wasn't really sure if that was what I wanted to try to do, or if that was just going to be something I did on the side or what. And so by the end of my senior year, I was kind of in between, like, am I going to go do art history and be kind of in this academic world, or do I maybe want to try to do pottery and be in this more physical, like hands-on world? And by the end of my senior year, I was like, let's try the hands-on thing, because I am burnt out on these books. Man. And so I think that really still influences my work a lot. But so I didn't go to school for ceramics. I just kind of learned with different potters whenever I could. So I did an internship in college at Red Dot Gallery in Birmingham. And part of the like payment, was classes. So I got to take oil painting and pottery classes with the artists there. And then I actually did get to take one ceramics class in college. We had like a program where you can take a class at another school. Right. And so I did that at UAB and got to take a full like course of wheel throwing. And after that, I was kind of like, okay, maybe I could try to do this. Like I got a little more confidence.
Yeah.
And my grandmother got me a wheel as my graduation present, like a pottery wheel, which was amazing.
Wow.
And I still have it, still the one I use. And anyway, so
Nice.
I took over my mom's like garage for about a year and a half, and worked during the day, and then on the weekends and at night I would just practice.
Mm,
And so yeah, so I sold my very first pots on Facebook, and
nice.
yeah. And then ended up moving here in 2014. My ex-husband lived here. And so
Okay.
I moved here and we shared a studio at Lowe Mill for 6 years. And so,
Mm,
yeah. So, and then in 2020, we got divorced. And so it's kind of like a restart for me a little bit because my art
yeah.
practice and our art business had been connected for so long, like we shared the business and the studio and we made collaborative work. Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, it was a little bit of like a restart for me, which has been really great actually, but it's just kind of weird. Like it's like I've been doing this for about 10 years, but it feels like I should be at some other place. It feels like I haven't taken a straight line there. I've gone
Yeah.
around and round and round. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the way it goes. I feel like so many people are like, I thought it was going to go this way, but then it went over here and then over there, and I don't know what's happening.
Right. We're just here. Just keep doing it.
Oh, that's awesome. I can't imagine like taking a trip to China like that young and getting to experience that. That has got to be so inspiring and really
Yeah.
memorable.
Yeah, it was really cool. And
So did like when you were there, did you just get, I mean, I guess you got to just walk in and they let you get on the wheel and do whatever you wanted to? Did they kind of teach you a little bit or?
yeah, I think they did like a little demonstration and then,
Okay.
just asked if a couple of us wanted to try it. So
Wow.
we just basically got our hands muddy. We didn't do a whole lot.
Yeah.
It was a
Oh,
very
that's
quick
so
like field
cool.
trip through the place.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh man, that is awesome. And then you just kind of just kept exploring it as you were doing other things. And then did you
Yeah.
get like a day job out of school and then kind of
Yeah.
keep trying at the pottery and everything?
Exactly. Yeah. So when after I graduated, I got a job at a lawyer's office, just like answering
Oh,
phones and filing, and then when I moved up here, I worked as a server at Surin. Um,
oh, okay.
and so I did that for about a year and a half after I moved here, and then I started teaching pottery classes.
Wow.
Um, and so ended up kind of leaving that job and just doing the pottery classes and selling work
Wow.
out of the Lowe Mill studio. And so,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Oh man. And then you and your ex-husband were kind of collaborating the whole time. And
mhm.
then I guess you were at a point where you basically had to figure out, okay, now that I'm not doing this with this person, what direction I want to go in?
Yeah,
Did
yeah.
you like I haven't like gone through the history of your work, but
Mhm.
how did your work change
Yeah.
2020
Um,
and where are you going now? Like what
yeah.
happened?
So I was developing my own work during that time too. And then we also
Okay.
did some collaborative stuff. But I used to make this work that was really heavily carved, and I would leave kind of the exposed clay. So you'd have like this glossy glazed part and then the like rougher stone areas.
Okay.
And I would do botanical patterns inspired by like Alabama flora and kind of
Yeah.
my favorite plants and stuff. And
Mm.
so I still make a lot of that work. But in 2020, I started playing around with decal mugs. So, like putting photographs and handwritten quotes on mugs.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and that was kind of inspired by my gallery work. So, I have an installation that I've kind of done a few different versions of called the Witch Doctor's Chapel.
Okay.
And it involves, I kind of hand wrote out some poems that I'd written, and family photos and decaled them onto pieces.
Oh, wow.
And so I kind of took that into my more functional work during 2020 and put like, I used quotes from Black leaders in
Okay.
America. And anyway, so I kind of got into that a little bit. And then I have been making mushroom pieces and lady pots. So,
Oh, what's that now?
like feminine, so like pots that are shaped like women's bodies.
Okay.
So yeah, so yeah, just a little curvy shape, and then it'll have like a
Yeah.
butt and boobs and a little belly button. um, and so they're fun. And I think that for me was kind of uh, it helped me kind of celebrate myself and
Sure,
get
sure.
back into myself. And I feel like in my marriage, I kind of lost a lot of myself just trying to be what I thought I needed to be for that relationship, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think doing the mushroom pieces and doing the body pots, I get a good response from them. So that kind of outside validation is really
Oh,
exciting.
yeah.
And it's also, I kind of always have this, and that was kind of from that relationship, this kind of fighting in my head between like, is it art or is it too popular to be art or is it commercial? You know, this kind of back and forth. And so
Mm.
it was really nice to start making something that I was really excited about and people were really excited about. And it was selling, and I don't know. So I've been a little bit more product minded in the past couple of years, I think.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm getting ready to do some more like of my gallery stuff. I've just kind of had ideas popping up that I haven't had time to get to, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know all about that. Oh my
It's always
gosh.
a
I love that you brought that up though. I think that's a personal struggle for me. That's one of my biggest personal struggles is I like figuring out if this is something that I truly want to be making, or am I making it because I think it will sell or I think it will be something
yeah,
people will like, you know?
yeah, yeah.
And then needing that validation to like say, okay, yeah, I should be making this.
Right, yeah, I should. Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of ridiculous, you
It
know?
is. Like it feels
Uh,
so silly,
uh,
but I don't know.
yeah, I hear that. That's like one of my and I think it's an ongoing thing. Like I have to
Yeah.
talk myself back out of it every time. Like, no, wait a minute. You don't want to start making whatever because that's not what you like to do. Why are you
Yeah.
doing that?
Yeah. It's tough though as like a working artist, you know, because
Oh yeah.
I have a part-time job at the Huntsville Museum of Art. I work a couple
Yeah,
nights a week as an assistant.
sure.
And then mostly otherwise I'm teaching.
Mm.
And that's kind of where my income's coming from, but I still sell my work. And so there comes this like place where you have to say, okay, this is my product and this is my like artwork that I'm making for me.
Yeah.
Because you still, you know, I still got to sell pots.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's
That
so
is so
tricky because
challenging.
like
Yeah.
I still got to make those products, you know, like I don't want to, I struggle with that a lot because
Yeah.
I think that with especially product development, you get more success when you have like a predictable, like people know what you're going to make, right? You're making the same
Sure.
things in the same line of work. And I really struggle with that because my brain is all over the place. And I'm like, I want to
Yeah.
make this and I want to make this and I want to make that. So
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I'm like, how do I find something that I'm going to keep enjoying making, but is still going to keep bringing money in? It's hard. I don't know. And I
Yeah,
don't think there's any, I think it's kind of like the rest of artists' life, is it, and life in general, is it's just going to change and you just keep have to adapting and
yeah, yeah.
keep adapting.
I think there's a lot of like inner work of like figuring out what you want to make because it's such a personal process in itself.
Absolutely.
And it depends on, I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, but like if it's like gallery show or like a series that you're trying to put together, that feels like a whole different world and a whole
It
different
is.
audience and
Hmm.
process than if I'm trying to sell something like online or
Yes.
at like some markets or something.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it's interesting because I think all of my work is personal to a certain degree, but especially the gallery work, it's kind of about like childhood trauma and working through that and
Mm.
living through like, loving this Southern culture and then also all the icky stuff about it and
Yeah.
kind of holding all of that together. And I think that um, the more personal that work gets, the more it connects with people.
Mm.
But then it's also difficult to then make that into like a product that connects with people.
Mm.
Like you said, it's such a different thing.
Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I think it's
My I've
okay to separate
like
it.
installation. Like, do you? So like, in your gallery work, is it more like individual pieces that would be
Um,
laid?
I've done a little bit of both, but mostly it's more of like a full installation
Mm.
when I've done it, which I really enjoy. Just kind of taking that space and transforming it into something else.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what I studied in school too. My focus was medieval art history and like
Oh, wow.
chapels and churches, and then also relics and reliquaries and these kind of magical kind of sacred objects and
Yeah, yeah.
spaces. And so that's kind of where my brain is whenever I'm thinking about my installation work is kind of
Mhm.
creating this whole like magical space with light and with like memory and kind of that.
Sure.
I feel like that's kind of what makes the magic for me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, installations. I mean, how do you I mean, I've often wondered that. I was like, okay, like these could be maybe some public art or something, but
Uh-huh.
or like state galleries or whatever, but
Yeah.
you can't really translate that into like individual items when they all kind of have meaning together.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really because when I have done the installations, I spend all this time and I kind of map out the gallery and put it
Yeah.
all together so that it fits. But then I think for most of my gallery pieces, I have had work for sale. I definitely have some that I'm like, no, this is I made a reliquary of for my dad. And it's a poem I wrote about him and then his watch in the bottom. And so
Oh, wow.
that one's like not for sale. That one is mine. Um, but I have had pieces for sale and it's really like conflicting because they're so personal. They're um it just feels like I'm selling like little parts of myself at that point. And then
Yeah.
I love it because it connects with other people and I tend to have really great conversations with people at those exhibits.
Mhm.
Just really nice to hear somebody else say like, "Oh wow, yeah, me too," like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
this is a lot." And um, I've experienced that too, just that mix of like pain and beauty and all of it mixed together. And so it's weird to sell it off, but it's
Yeah.
also really nice to know that like somebody else is enjoying this now.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Oh, that's
weird.
interesting. You're doing all of these things in order to be, you know, um, a working artist and creating your pottery. Um, and you mentioned to me before the call that you started going into like some markets and things.
Yeah.
So, how has that process been for you? And like, how did you get started in it? And
Mhm.
then how has it gone?
Yeah. So when I had the studio at Lowe Mill with my ex-husband, we did a couple of markets,
Mm.
but because we had that public storefront at Lowe Mill,
Yeah.
we didn't necessarily have to do that. Um,
Mhm.
and which was nice. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
actually in 2020, before I got divorced, we moved our studio home.
Mm.
And so I have like a gallery, a little studio shed in the backyard, which is really great. But that also means that I don't have that storefront and that kind of
Sure.
traffic. And so
Yeah.
that was really one of the biggest pushes for me to start like, okay, let's start doing these markets and see what
Yeah.
happens. Um, so I teach a lot of pottery classes too. So at this point, I'm just kind of trying to balance that out. You know, how many classes and how many markets do I need to do to live, but also to not go crazy or have my body revolt. You know,
Yeah.
um, so um, so yeah, so it's an interesting thing to get into. I do a lot of like smaller markets, like the Lowe Mill Outdoor Market, things like that, where you don't have to jury in, you just sign up and you go.
Yeah.
And then that versus the jury art festivals like Montesano or Tennessee Craft or Kentuck, where you have to, present a body of work.
Mhm.
And so that has been a little bit more of a challenge for me. Last year was the first year that I really started getting back into those shows and markets.
Yeah.
And so all summer I did the Low Mill markets. And then I got into Montesano last year for the first time, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And that was really great. And so then this year I've been applying I was like, okay, let's try more of these juried shows this year.
Mhm.
And I've struggled a little bit. And I think it's because I got some feedback from one of the shows that I applied to. They'll sometimes give you jury notes from people that,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
I
which
didn't
is
know that.
yeah, Tennessee Craft is the one that gave me like some notes, and Kentuck said you could request notes, but I think the jurors hadn't left any on my application or whatever. But
Yeah.
when Tennessee Craft sent it, I was like, "Thank you, this is what I need." But the comment was that I didn't have enough cohesion in like the work I was displaying, and
Mm.
so now I'm kind of thinking like, because generally at the low mill markets and things like that, I have kind of my mushroom work and my lady pots and my botanical carved work. And I feel like it looks like it's all made by the same person,
Mm.
but it's not as cohesive as some of those larger shows want. And
Oh,
so now I'm kind of trying to think like, okay, I think I'm going to have to make a body of work or a collection and apply to this show with it and apply to this show with the other, separate it
wow.
even more, which is a weird thing to think about, but
Yeah. That's like a kind of a mixture of gallery work and show work is what
yeah.
they're asking for.
Yeah, yeah. It's sort of like make something that will sell, but make it art, make it
Yeah. And so,
make
like,
it
when I look at
a
your
show.
work, I definitely see, like, okay, this is made by the same artist, and there's, some of the same kind of, like, I guess, finishes and,
Mhm.
shapes and things.
Mhm.
So I wonder why they said that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's always there's usually a different jury each year for the same shows, and so I think a big lesson that I learned this year is that just because you get in one year doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get in the next year,
Oh, yeah.
um, which is even more of that. Like you have to adapt and you have to just always be moving and kind of hustling,
Yeah, yeah. I
which,
mean, and I feel like I've heard some other artists, like artists that have been doing I mean, like, gosh, I've spoken to some people like that's their lifestyle. They travel
mhm,
around and that's what they do.
right.
And
Yeah,
I'm like, how do you live that way?
I
Because I
know.
will pass out.
I know. Same. Literally, my body will just be like, no, we're not doing that anymore. We're
But they're
done.
like, they're and those artists, they're doing it for a living like that. And when they don't get into something that maybe they expected to, because
Yeah,
they like count on it as part of like, I make this much money at this show, and this is part of my income for this year, and
right.
they
It becomes
counted
part of the
on it.
budget.
It's interesting though, because they'll just be like, and they just keep applying to other places,
Yeah.
other ones, like, well, let's try this instead. And
Mhm.
they just kind of shrug it off. Or I feel like maybe like myself, who wouldn't be doing as many shows, it's more of like, wait a minute, why didn't I get into this show?
I
Like,
know.
okay, this is
Yeah.
disappointing,
Yeah.
but
And I
maybe
think
like
that's
when you're doing it all the time, you just kind of, you're just like, okay, I don't know what the deal was.
right. Didn't work. Oh, well, try
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. I'll try again next year. And that's another thing, we were talking about Moss Rock and
Mhm.
how you're planning on being at Moss Rock.
Mhm.
I'm supposed to be at Moss Rock. I don't know if I'm going to be there or not.
Right.
But it's like you said, like last year, it was okay for you.
Uh-huh.
And I've also heard artists say, like you have to go to the same show multiple times
I
to
have,
really get a
yeah.
feel for it.
Yeah.
But then you're paying hundreds of dollars
Yeah.
every time you
To
go.
test it out,
Yeah, just to try.
to experiment. Yeah.
Like, yeah,
So,
I'm excited about this chance,
this
but
chance I have it might work out if the weather and everything else goes well. Yeah.
I'm like, oh man. And I think part of I'm a little bit, this past year, I experienced probably the first show that was just so difficult. And
Yeah.
it was a 1-day show and it
Yeah.
was terrible weather. We were running late. We had to set up so fast and get everything
Stressful.
done. And it was just like, it was a miserable day. And
Yeah.
after that experience, now I'm like so hesitant to sign up for anything
Right.
because
For
I'm like,
anything at all. Yeah.
that was crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I cannot do this. I
Right.
am done.
Yes.
I am going to work on that website shop. You
Okay.
know what I mean?
Yes. That's what I said for this fall. I applied to, I think, 5 or 6 shows for the fall. I got into one, Moss Rock, and
Yeah.
everything else. I did not get into Kentuck. I applied for the first time, and I wasn't too surprised or upset by that. I was like, okay, I tried. But
Yeah.
everything else I got waitlisted for. And
Okay.
so I was like, I had the same thought. I was like, well, guess we're revamping that website this fall. Time for the website.
Okay, let's get on our online presence and everything, put it out there more,
Yes.
schedule like content,
Oh
I
gosh.
mean,
Yes. I'm so bad at that. I'm so bad at it.
that's I mean, either I don't know. I feel like artists are the most resilient, adaptable people in the world if
Yeah.
they're going to succeed at what they're doing because you have to pivot
Yep.
every single
Yes.
time you come something like, okay, I've paid $400 to be in the show. I made $100. Now I'm out $300 and I
Gotta
need
try
to
something
figure
else.
out how to pay my bills.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly. Yes. Yes. I I think all the time about artists that I know that have kids. And I'm like, how? It's me and my dog, and
yeah,
we're making it, but it's a struggle
yeah.
some days, Like it's just, yeah, I think it really is something you have to be tenacious and you have to be adaptable and you have to just have a bunch of irons in the fire just in case, I think.
Yeah, yeah. You have to be able to like just change direction as
Yeah.
soon as something happens or you realize
Yeah.
that show that I typically get 5,000 from
Yeah.
is now gone and
Yeah.
I'm not in it. So
Yeah.
now what?
Right. And like,
Where's that money going?
yeah, that's kind of where I'm at this fall because I got into Montesano last year. It was my best show of the year. And so I was kind of like, okay, I got in last year, so maybe I can count on this one, but
Yeah.
that's not how it is.
Yeah.
That's not real life.
And I mean, if it's like, different juries and different, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, it's a different jury each year, so you never know.
yeah,
Um, yeah, because I applied with the same work and booth shots this year as I did last year, but yeah,
interesting.
I don't know if that's good or
Hmm.
bad, but
I wondered if it's valuable to like, because, they always tell you like who's jurying, right?
Hmm.
Like who's on, who the people are,
Hmm.
like to research. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so much work, but you would have to like research them, see what
Yeah.
they're doing and interested in and what they say about stuff,
Yeah.
like online or something, and then
Yeah.
tailor your entry to that person.
To that. Yeah. I
That's a
mean, I
lot of
think that's
work.
that's a lot of work, but I think that sounds like a smart strategy. But it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have no idea who was jurying for Moss Rock at all, and I hate to say
No,
that.
I think sometimes it's an anonymous jury too.
Yeah.
Sometimes, but yeah.
But so one of the things that we were talking about, Sarah and I, is about spending money on these shows and
Yes.
whether or not to do it. And I've been asking everybody about Moss Rock like it's the biggest life decision ever for some
It feels
reason.
like
And
that.
I'm so like I was almost to the point where I was like, okay, I'm doing it. Like I signed up, I'm doing it.
Right.
And then I started thinking about planning for it. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh God, like I need to go and get some more prints made. I
Mhm.
need to get some more like packaging things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's even more and more investment and more investment.
Yes.
Do I really want to do that?
Right. Is that really what I
Things
want to
get
do?
more and more expensive. And
Yes.
then I've never actually been to it myself,
Yeah.
which I hate to admit because it's like right around the corner from me.
It's true, but still
And
hard to do every
I'm
day.
I'm all about going to like art festivals and stuff like that and like
Mhm.
shopping them and checking out like who's there and
Yeah.
that kind of thing, and to not have that information that probably adds to my nervousness
That
about
makes
it.
sense. Yeah, for sure, for sure. It's
So
good
like what was
to
your I mean, okay, what was your experience last year with Monster?
so Friday, I think I can't remember. I think we just set up on Friday. And then Saturday was pretty busy. It's good traffic.
Yeah.
Um, Sunday, there was decent traffic, but it seemed like everybody was at the beer tent, which was right across from my tent. So, like, at least they saw my work, you know?
Yeah.
But I think that people were kind of funneling straight to there. So, yeah. But
Interesting.
I made, like I said, I made good enough sales throughout the weekend to go again, to
Yeah,
try it again.
yeah,
But
try it again.
um,
Was the weather good that time? I
the
guess it
weather
was.
was great. It was
Yeah.
a little hot in November. It's the first weekend of
Wow.
November. It was a little hot, but it was good weather. It didn't rain or anything. Yeah, so good weather, pretty good turnout. I think it just is a matter of what people are coming for.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
hard with those
And
shows because
like,
like you want to attract as many people as you can, but you want to attract a specific group of people too, and it's tough. I think putting on those shows is a tough job.
so and this is your opinion, and this is
Mhm.
based on last year, but so what type of art and you know
Yeah.
artists were out there? Like I got the impression it was more like kind of like higher end interior
Mhm.
designer-ish kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, I think that seems about right. There was someone selling like antique sort of furniture, but it was like antique furniture that he then like upcycled. Um, and
Mhm.
so there was stuff like that. There were larger paintings. I think there was a pretty good range, but I think higher end interior design is probably a good description of what I saw there. It's always
Interesting.
hard because I do shows on my own, so I don't always get to go around and see everything. But from what I could see, that seemed accurate.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did a show like that this year, and it was just kind of like, this is not my venue.
Yeah, Yeah. And you don't know
Well,
necessarily right away
no.
if you fit or not. And I can't, and that's part of why I'm a little hesitant with the more high end shows is because I'm like, I don't know if I fit there either.
Right? Like, I don't know. I think it
Yeah.
is really good to go to those shows,
Mhm.
and visit, which is not something that I'm very good about doing, but I'm always like, that's a good idea. I should do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But
Check
even
it out
then,
before.
it's hard to see, like, I think it's hard to go outside of yourself and see, does my work fit here or fit there? It's
Yeah.
so hard to see it
Like
not
if
being able to
have
do
you
it.
ever had an experience where you went to a show? Well, I mean, you just said that one show that you did, but like, have you gone to an experience like that and realized something new about your work? Like, oh, my work is very, I don't know, like delicate, like, or it's more bulky, or it's more,
Mhm.
like, have you ever gotten that kind of internal feedback sometimes when you see your work next to
To other,
a
yeah.
group?
Yeah. I think at Panoply this year, I kind of had that realization of like, oh, my work is kind of varied. I don't have this booth of all similar patterns, or, my color schemes are very similar. My favorite color is green, so everything's going to be kind of
Yeah,
green.
yeah.
But there are a lot of artists, particularly potters, who are making work. They're making mugs and bowls and cups and all these different types of pots, but they all have this similar pattern on them that unifies them as a group.
Mm.
And so I think this year was when I really started realizing, like, oh, yeah, my work is kind of not as consistent as other people's work.
Oh.
Um, and then when I was still at Lowe Mill, I actually, my work kind of changed a little bit. I used to make, when I first started throwing, I think this is common for potters, you want to make everything as thin and delicate as possible, because that's kind of showing your skill. And
Mm.
so when you're practicing, you're like, okay, let me practice as thin as I can get. But then as I started selling my work, I had people say, like, I love this, but I'm scared to use it. I'm afraid I'm going to break
Oh.
it. And one of my favorite things about making pottery is that connection you have from me making something and then you using it. So it always
Mhm.
just breaks my heart a little bit when somebody's like, no, I'm not using that. It just sits there. And I've gotten better with that over the years where I'm like, okay, that's fine. But um, it really changed my work. And I was like, okay, let's make this sturdy. Let's make this actually functional. Um, but yeah, so I don't
Oh,
know.
that's
Maybe I
interesting.
went
I
on a
never
little bit
thought
of a
about that.
tangent.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting point, especially with pottery. And
It's this
like, you're
weird
really kind of
mix.
having to think in an engineering kind of way, and that you're like making something that's gonna work for something.
Yeah.
And then when someone tells you, well, I'm just gonna display it,
Yeah. It's
then
like,
you're like, wait a minute, I put a lot of thought into how this works.
yeah, how are you going to use
Like,
it?
it holds water, and
Yeah.
it's supposed to be used for something. And then,
Right. Right. It's also
but
weird too. Yeah. How that like affects the value, that function.
um,
Because for me, like you said, it's like I put more work into this,
yeah,
but
yeah,
a lot of times that the fact that something has a function makes it feel more utilitarian and like it should be cheaper, which is a
yeah,
weird thing to kind of play around with too. Yeah.
that's it. Yeah, you're right.
It's weird.
It's that functional art that people
Yeah.
are like, I don't know if they have it in their mind that it has to be more price friendly because of
Mhm.
like big box stores or something. And they're like, that's
Maybe.
similar to that because it's like this functional thing I'm going out and buying and
Yeah.
supposed to do something for me versus
Yeah.
be looked at and
Yeah.
protected. I don't
Mhm.
know.
I think that goes into kind of this idea between like women's work and artwork and kind of craft versus art, domestic art
Yeah.
versus art. Um, I think about
Oh,
that a
yeah.
lot, and I I think that's one of the fun things about making functional art is kind of coming up against that a little bit. And then it
Yeah.
also just kind of brings me back to all that that stuff I was talking about that my mom and my grandmother did. Because when I was young, I didn't think of that as art or creative or anything. You know, it
Yeah.
was just what they did. It was just kind of a fun little thing. And
Yeah.
I kind of do that in my self-talk, right? Like I'm like, oh, well, that, I just learned to embroider. And I was like, oh, whatever. That's just a little thing I do. And my best friend told me recently, like, I complain a lot about, oh, why am I so tired? I have like chronic tension in my neck that causes some migraines. And so I
Yeah.
have to be careful not to push too hard. But then I also get really frustrated when I have to rest. So she will say, like, okay, well, yeah, maybe you stopped working on what you thought you were working on at 7 o'clock tonight, but then you kept working on other things like your embroidery or like knitting or whatever, until midnight.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're tired. Just like,
Oh
I
man.
don't really think of that as work though. That's just something I enjoy, but that doesn't mean it's not work.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. Holy cow.
Sorry, I'll take you on a tangent.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. That's fascinating because I'm actually looking into embroidering myself.
It's really
Like
fun.
I've tried, like I even like did some little hoops for my
Mhm.
kids to try to do it.
Uh-huh.
And they think it's really fun, but
Yeah.
of course they lose patience. They can't just sit there and do that.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, but I'm thinking, I love this because it feels and I hate to say this because it feels like I'm just saying something so awful, but it feels like almost like women's work
Yeah,
or like motherly or
yeah.
I don't know,
Domestic or
like, yeah, domestic and crafty or
Mhm.
something. And it makes me feel like, oh, I'm doing good, like I'm doing
Right, yeah.
something that's like, housework.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
But not really. Like I'm like planning on embroidering skulls and stuff and like hanging it on the wall. But I
Yeah.
mean,
That's housework. That's building your home. That's valuable, and
I'm
like
like following these artists that have like, these very modern, very stark phrases on their
yes,
embroidery. I'm
love it.
like, this is awesome.
I
I
love
love
naughty
this.
embroidery.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. This is fantastic.
Yes.
Okay. How domestic is this really?
You're right.
And I'm not like decorating my children's clothing or like
Mhm.
some towels for the kitchen or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So that's such a weird like mental process. And I'm like,
It
why
is.
am I thinking that about it? And it kind of goes along the lines of, is this functional or is this supposed to be like appreciated and put
Mhm.
away? And
Yeah.
there's so many like thought processes I think that we as artists kind of go through in
Yeah.
our minds. And we might not even know where that crap comes from. Like,
Yeah.
what gave me the idea that that was more feminine or,
Right. I mean,
and why am I interested in that? Why am I
uh-huh.
doing it that way?
Right. I think it's like it's our history, like that's one of the things I love about art too, is like calling back all those historical references and the ones that we, like you said, that we don't even realize we're influenced by, but we're just like, oh, I want to do this thing. I feel like I want to do it and I don't know why.
I mean, like, I love Jane Austen. Maybe that's the
Yes.
thing. I'm
Same.
like, that's something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I feel like a genteel lady when I'm
Maybe I
doing
need
my
to drink some
embroidery.
tea while I'm doing
There you
embroidery.
go.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so weird
It
though. There's
is.
like some kind of psychological thing on there.
Mhm.
And that probably influences all of our art and what
Yeah.
we end up making and what
Yeah.
we end up needing to do or wanting to do in the first place.
Yeah. But I
That's
think
so
it's so
complicated.
like I like to play with fiber as well, like spinning yarn
Yeah.
and
Oh
dyeing
gosh.
and that kind of thing. And I think that clay and yarn are these two like very like universal human arts,
Yeah, yeah.
because like, I mean, yarn, women and humans have been making for centuries for us to wear our clothes,
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
same for like ceramics. We've been using it not just to make like sculptures and like the Venus of Willendorf, like those fertility goddess sculptures
Sure.
from ancient times, but also cups and bowls and those functional things. And so I
Yeah.
think that's one of the really beautiful things about those more feminine domestic arts is that they are an essential part of our lives
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
just so intricately connected with the human experience that
Well,
I love it.
I mean, yeah. And I mean, I
Also,
think
it's crazy
there's,
how it's devalued, but
yeah, that's making sense.
yeah.
I like, I recently came across a video on Instagram and I didn't know what I was watching at the beginning. And it was this little bitty tiny Asian lady, and she was obviously in some Asian country and she was doing some hard work.
Mhm.
She was cutting things down and strapping things and I mean like things this stuff, whatever she was doing was like looked like it was heavier than her own body weight, and she's
Yeah.
like lifting it,
Physical labor.
doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
By the end of this video, this lady was making this delicate, beautiful paper.
Oh,
That's what she was
wow.
doing.
Wow. I
And
love
I was
that
like,
too. How
holy cow,
physical that stuff can be.
it was so amazing
Yeah.
because she was this small person and she was like really kicking ass making this
Yes.
stuff. And I
Love
was
it.
like, that is insane. And it's
Yeah.
paper. It's paper
Right.
like, artists are probably using it for
Yeah.
something. It's beautiful,
Right.
amazing paper. But I was like, holy cow. And we don't even appreciate it, like
Yeah.
all the work that went into like she was like,
It is.
I don't know why she was doing it because I don't know about paper making, but
Right.
she was like putting it in these streams of water where it's like coming down from a mountain or
Oh,
something. And like
wow.
the fibers were like flowing in the stream and
Oh,
doing something. I don't know.
amazing.
But I was like, holy cow, that's like spiritual. She's like
Right. Yeah.
getting her whole workout in. I mean,
Yes. Oh, I love that. I think that's one of the things I love about pottery too, is that
very
it's like
physical.
physical, it's delicate, it's like this alchemy and engineering and chemistry that comes into it. And
Yeah.
it feels like spiritual to me too. Like if I went through a year where I was not able to throw very much at all. And it had been about a month and I just was doing lots of administrative stuff. And it
Mm.
was when I had the studio at Lowe Mill. So it was after I had kind of gotten into like my practice,
Yeah.
and then had stopped. And I was like just feeling like depressed. And I finally got back on the wheel one day and I just started crying. I
Oh
was
my
like,
god.
this is what I needed, like this. I just needed mud on my hands.
That's
And it's
awesome.
so funny how it encompasses all those things, I guess.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man.
And fiber too. Like when
Yeah.
I started learning about what all goes into from processing the raw fibers, either from an animal or from like cotton bolls or silkworm pods. It's just so fascinating, all the work and the process that goes into it. And
Oh
I think
yeah.
that's one of those hidden parts of being an artist that you don't always notice in the final work.
Absolutely. I think I love like seeing artists doing the work like
Yeah,
online and getting
same.
to see how they're doing it because I think that's another part of like valuing what they're doing is
Yes.
because we don't know what they did to get there to like actually
No.
put that together.
Yeah.
And it's like $300 and not $20. What?
Right. Yeah. People are like, $80 for a mug. Sarah, what are you talking about? And then, I mean, I have other people who are like, you're not charging enough for that mug, that
Yeah.
that know the work that goes into it and also, have maybe been familiar with a different market as well. I think
Yeah.
that's a big part of
Yeah.
it too. But I think that social media is really kind of a double-edged sword when it comes to that, because you see so much more of an artist process that you would normally. But then, there's of course all this other stuff with social media of like trying to get seen and trying to, becomes like trying to entertain your audience while you're trying to work. And it's a whole little bit of a circus.
Yeah.
It feels like.
Like you're tap dancing while you're doing pottery. You're like, look, guys.
Yeah. I made one TikTok video, actually. I had this little finger puppet of a possum.
Oh, it's awesome.
And I made her I called her Henrietta, my pottery assistant, and had her like doing the pots or whatever. And it was a very successful video, but I've never done it again. So that's kind of story of my life.
I thought about doing stuff like that too. And I thought about I was literally thinking about that before I got on to do this interview with you. I was thinking about something like that. And it popped into my head because I do stuff like that with my kids.
Yeah.
And I do goofy, silly, I don't know, improv.
Yeah.
Randomly. And so it can be kind of fun.
Uh-huh.
And it's fun to watch.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's like, who am I doing that for? Am I doing it for me, or am I doing it for somebody else? Like, am I trying to get attention? And I still haven't decided if I'm gonna go through the process, because I have a really funny idea, but I wanted to put it on the Art Talk stuff. And then you got social media, and you're trying to decide what you're going to post and what you're not going to post.
And if your space is pretty enough to post, or if it's not. And yeah.
My space is never pretty enough to post. One time it was pretty enough to post, and that's the one time that I posted it. Isn't that awful? I was otherwise it's a mess.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just cleaned it.
Right. And I think that I can kind of rationalize with myself and say, well, I enjoy seeing other people's messes. I'm always looking at the backgrounds of people's stuff, ooh, what you got over there, but when it's mine, I'm like, that's not right. I did it wrong.
I don't need people to see that.
Right.
That's yucky or whatever,
I think I
haven't emptied that paint cup for months.
Okay, right. Yeah. I have clay buckets like that for sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So, Sara, what is some advice that you would give maybe your younger self or someone who's still in school or starting out or, trying to get started in doing pottery type work?
So I'm going to kind of cheat and use a quote from another potter I know. Guadalupe Robinson is a potter here in Huntsville. She's a Mexican-American potter and just one of my pottery idols. And it's always been really helpful for me. It's one of the things I love about the pottery community is how helpful and collaborative people can be. But Guadalupe told me one time, I was asking her about, how do you get into galleries? How are you doing this as a living, And she said, just make the work. The rest will follow. Wow. And I have it printed out on my office. I made a little poster for myself. And I think that is one of the best pieces of advice that I have and that I remind myself of is, I get really bogged down and like we were talking about, what work do I make for where and what are people going to like and what do I want to make and, all of it. And if you just kind of, whenever you do that, you get to that place, just go make something, just go be in your space. Yeah. So I think that's
really good. That's really good.
My theory with social media a little bit too, as I've been kind of protecting that workspace a little bit. I'm like, I know I should be sharing this, but right now it's overwhelming for me to share this. So I just need to go be in my space. I just need to go work and eventually I'll show people what I'm doing. But
wow.
Yeah.
That's really profound advice because I think this, and I hope I haven't taken over the interview with my soapboxes, but we have talked about some really interesting stuff because I think it's that mental processing behind the scenes that's so fascinating for everyone and that we struggle with so much. We have these ideas about what is art, what's valuable,
Yeah.
you know,
What's worthy and what's not. And
is this, are people buying me? Do I belong in this space or do I not belong in this space? Is my
yeah.
art belong, but I don't belong? I mean, it could just go on and on forever.
It gets so overwhelming.
It really does.
And I think that's partly like how a lot of artist brains work. We were talking about needing to be able to pivot and have a bunch of things going on at the same time. And I think that is kind of the way that a lot of artist brains work.
Yeah.
But it's so nice and I think important to have conversations like this and to realize that you're not just driving yourself crazy alone in your studio. I was listening to your interview with Heather Bombach yesterday, and she was talking about that, like just the importance of being around other artists. And I was just listening to it and I was like, wow, yeah, I have a real tendency to isolate myself and, I just work
I think
alone.
a lot of us do.
Yeah. And I just am like, I need to get out more into the artist community, like ALWCA meetings and,
Yeah.
I live right across from Lowe Mill. I could go over there and hang out a lot more. Come on, girl.
Oh, that's awesome. I wish I lived across from Lowe Mill.
It's really convenient. It is.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. It's really great when I do the Lowe Mill artist markets because if I forget something, I can run.
Oh man,
which happens
walk across the street.
Happens more often than it should, but it's okay.
That is awesome. Holy cow!
Yeah.
That's something that I've really learned. Like even in doing this podcast and being part of ALWCA, I'm like, holy cow! Like why haven't I done this earlier? Because it makes you realize that you're not just like off crazy by yourself, worrying about those things and trying to figure them out.
Yeah.
Everybody is. Everybody.
We all are.
Even like the people that you admire so much and you think, gosh, they're just a bunch of badasses. And you're like,
it together. They figured it out. Why can't I figure it out?
No, they're doing the exact same thing that you're doing.
We're all flying by the seat of our pants and just trying to figure it out.
They will have like art over in Europe somewhere in some collection, and they still are like, I don't know if my work is even
Am I
good.
A real artist?
Yeah. And you're like, holy cow, are you kidding me?
Like, yeah, of course you are, girl. Yeah. Yeah.
You're practically famous. What are you talking about?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today, Sarah. It's been amazing. I love it. Thank you for listening to Art Talk with April. New episodes are out every Tuesday at 6 p.m.